In the previous lessons, we discussed about accessing elements inside the DOM. In this lesson, we want to focus more on functions and the concept of event delegation. And to do that, we are going to build a tabbed navigation. This is the final result. So basically, we want to be able to switch from a tab content to another, selecting one of the tabs in the top navigation, like that. Okay, so let's start, and this is our basic starting project. So as we did with the modal window, I have already created the basic HTML and CSS structure. So let's go quickly through it. This is the index.html file, and we have two main elements: a tabs navigation, which is the top navigation, and a tabs content for the content of the tabs. So note that each tab content, so each list item, has an ID equal to the href of the anchor tag in the top navigation, and this is something we are going to use in the JavaScript. Okay, now let's switch to the CSS. And here we have some basic style for the top navigation. And the only thing that we need to notice is that we created a selected class for the selected anchor tag. So basically this class is used to give a different style. If you take a look here, you see the selected anchor tag has a different background color, a different color, and a top line. Okay, then the style for the tabs content, and again the only thing you have to notice is that by default this content is hidden as a display none, but then the selected class is used to show the content display block, and again this class we are gonna use it in the JavaScript. Okay, if we go back to the index.html, I have already included the main.js file, so we are ready to start. The first thing I want to do, I want to store our tabs, the navigation and the content inside a variable. So let's define first of all a variable tabs container for the entire element. So tabs container. Okay, the tabs container has a class of tabs. So document dot get elements by class name. And the name of the class is tabs. Then for the top navigation, so var tabs navigation. The tabs navigation is a class of tabs navigation. So tabs container dot get element by class name. Okay, and that here would work just fine for the tabs navigation, but I want to use a different method here, a method you should be familiar with, which is the query selector method. This method accepts as argument a CSS selector and return the first matching element. So query selector, and since it accepts a CSS selector, for the class I need to add a dot, and it returns an element only. Okay, the good thing about this method is that you can use it to access, let's say, any kind of element in the DOM, because you can pass a generic CSS selectors. For example, let's say that you want to access an input element and you need to specify the type of input, for example text. You could use this query selector method just like that. So that's really handy. Let's go back, let's save. The query selector, as we said, returns just the first matching element. There is also a query selector all, which returns all the elements matching that CSS selector. In our case, we are fine with the query selector because we have only one navigation, of course. And then finally, for the tab content. And again, also in this case, I could use the query selector because the tabs content has a class of tabs content. But I would rather use a different method, a method to traverse the DOM. So basically, the tabs content, you can see from the index.html file, is a sibling of the tabs navigation. So here, let's write tabs navigation, and then let's take is sibling. So dot next element sibling and save. So, as the name of this property says, the next element sibling returns the element immediately following the specified element. So, in our case, the element that follows the tabs navigation, tabs content. Okay, as you can imagine, JavaScript provides also with a previous element sibling that we are not gonna use in this example. Okay, so now that we have stored our elements, what we have to do, we need to listen to the click on the top navigation. So let's write down what we are supposed to do. So we have to listen to the click on the top navigation anchor tag, and then show the content, new content, let's say. Okay, so we should add an event listener to each anchor tag inside the tabs navigation. But let's say that creating event listeners for lots of elements can slow down your page. And it's not really the case of this example because we have only 4 anchor tags. But let's say that in general, it would be a better choice to listen to an event on a parent element and then taking advantage of what is called event delegation. So basically, when, for example, we click on an element, this anchor tag here, JavaScript can trigger the click event on the element itself, but also on any parent elements of the anchor tag. And it's called event bubbling. So the event starts at the most specific element, so starts at the anchor tag, but then it flows outwards. This flow of events is the default one for the add event listener method, which is the method we are going to use. So we should take advantage of this flow of events. So let's add an event listener to the tabs navigation. And the event we want to listen to is the click event, and then our anonymous function, and I'm gonna pass the event object. So here we want to show the new content. Let's save, and just for now, let's console.log, for example, click. Let's refresh here and test, and it's working. But now we are interested only in clicks on the anchor tags. Right now, if I click on the tabs navigation but not on a tab, I'm still writing in the console. Basically, the tabs navigation is this element here. So if I click here, I'm still clicking on it. So switch to the console tab, click here, and you see I'm still writing inside the console. Well, in the previous lessons, we said that the event object stores details about the event that triggered it. So, and we said that the target property can be used to know which was the target of the event. So instead of writing click, simply click, let's write event.target. Save, refresh. So when I click on the anchor tag, the target is the anchor tag. But if I click outside, still inside the navigation though, the target is the navigation. So in our function, let's remove this one, or just right here, we should write something if event.target is anchor tag, then show the new content. So how to check if the event tag is an anchor tag? We can use the tag name property. So the tag name property applied to an element basically returns the name of the element, the tag name of the element. So refreshing here, if I click on the anchor tag, I have the A because it's the name of the anchor tag, while if I click outside, I have nav. And just to avoid any kind of inconsistency, let's convert this string, this one is a string, to lowercase. So this is a string method that basically converts the string to lowercase. Refresh. So again, we still have a and nav outside. So basically, this can be written as event.target dot to lowercase equal to a. And in that case, we want to show the new content. So now we just need to understand what to do to show the new content. In this case, I want to define a function to show the new content. And we have never really discussed about function, even if we have used function. For example, here, this is a function, and we already said that this function is known as anonymous function because it doesn't have a name. So basically, we use the function keyword, and then we use round brackets to wrap the argument of the function. And finally, the curly brackets for the content of the function. But what if we want to define our own function? Well, for example, in our case, I want to define a function update tabs, a function that is going to take care of showing the new content. So, first of all, we need to declare the function. So, function, and the name of the function, in our case, update tabs. And then my brackets and curly brackets. Great. And then, of course, we need to call the function in our main code. So here, I'm going to call the update tabs function and save. And for now, just console.log. For example, function called. Save, refresh. And now, if we click on the anchor tags, you see we write inside the console. Okay, so we now need to understand what this function has to do. First of all, you may have noticed that clicking on the anchor tag, we update the URL. So this is the first thing we don't want to happen. And we already said that we could use the prevent default method applied to the event object. But to apply this method inside the update tabs, we have to provide to the update tabs the event object. And this can be passed as an argument here. Here, I'm going to add a parameter to the function, e. And note, we don't need to use the same name because this e here is gonna have the value of this e element here is gonna be the value of the argument we pass to the function when we call it. So here, e dot prevent default. Save. Remove this. And now if we click, you see the URL is not changing anymore. Okay, so that was the first thing to do. Now, while we were analyzing the style.css, we said that the selected class is used to change the style of the anchor tag. So the first thing we need to do, we need to update the top navigation. And to update the top navigation, we need to add the selected class to the anchor tag clicked and remove the selected the selected class from the anchor tag which is visible at the moment. So, okay, to remove, for example, if I click on new, I want to add the selected class to the new tab, but remove it from the inbox tab. So to remove the selected class from the inbox tab, first of all, I need to be able to access the tabs navigation. So the tabs navigation can be the second argument of this function. And here I'm gonna call it simply navigation. So navigation. And then I need to access the element with the class selected. So query selector, and then anchor tag with class of selected. and then remove the class. So now in this example, I'm gonna use the class list property, but if you want to support Internet Explorer 9, you could use a script like, for example, classy, as we already discussed about in the previous lesson. So class list, and then in this case I want to remove, so remove the class selected. But then we need to add this class to the anchor tag just clicked. But we just said that event.target gives us the target of the event, so the anchor tag itself. So event.target, and then class list, and then add selected. Save, refresh. Property of undefined, I forgot an S, sorry. Save, refresh, and now it's working. So basically we are successfully updating the top navigation. What's missing here is updating the content. So let's do that. Update, let's say tab content. So as we did for the navigation, the first thing we need to do, we need to hide the content visible at the moment and show the new content. And again, when we were looking at the style.css, we saw that the selected class is used to show and hide the tab content. So first, we need to hide the content visible at the moment. And to do that, we need to be able to access the tab's content. So let's add this as argument to our function. Content. So here, content. And now let's take, so query selector, the list item with the class of selected, and remove the class selected. So class list, remove selected. And now we need to show the new one. So content dot query selector. Now, which one is the new list item to be shown? Well, we said that the each list item has an ID which is equal to the href of the anchor tag in the navigation. So basically, we should take the list item with an ID which is the href of the anchor tag clicked. So I'm gonna add for now ID, and then so class list, and add selected. And this ID here should be the href of the selected anchor tag. So let's define a variable, so query val, for example, and let's put this equal to this value here. So I'm gonna replace this with query val. Okay, so first of all, this value here, this string here, I could write it as a list item and then plus the hash ID. So basically, this is how you sum strings. It's like with numbers, you use the plus sign. So let's write like that. So now this is what we need. So list item, okay, that's fine. But now the hash ID is the part which depends on the anchor tag clicked. And this is actually the href of the anchor tag clicked. And how do we access this value? We can use the hash property. So I can write e.target and then hash. Now, if we save and refresh, okay, so it says cannot read the property query selector of undefined, and the undefined is on line 11. So content looks like content is undefined, and content is our tabs content here. So tabs navigation next element sibling. I misspelled this one, sibling. Now if we refresh, and now it's working. Great. So you see now the content has been updated. Now, an important concept with function is the variable scope. So, for example, we created this query val variable here. And the important thing that you have to understand is that you can use this variable only inside the function. You cannot access the value of the variable outside what's it called, its scope, so outside the function. For example, if here I add the console.log query val, save, refresh, and now click, you see there is an error, query val is not defined. Again, because we are trying to access a variable outside the scope of the variable. But what if we want to access the value of a variable defined inside a function outside the function? Well, we can do that, and basically if a function can return a value. So here we can add return the value we want to return, in our case query val. And now in the main code we can store this variable, so function var, for example, we can store, this returned value in a variable. And now if we console.log function var and click, you see now it's working. So basically, if you want to access the value of a variable defined inside the function, you need to return this variable. Okay, perfect. Now, before closing the lesson, this lesson, there is just one last note. So, in the first lesson, I told you every time we are gonna wrap our code inside this anonymous function. Okay, and I said the meaning of why we are doing this will be clear in a couple of lessons. And now it should be clear, and it's basically related to the concept of variable scope that we just discussed about. So let's say that you have more than one script. It is possible that you use a name for one of your variable, which is also used by another script, and that could accidentally change or update your variable, and that would break your code. So if you use the anonymous function to wrap your code, basically you protect your variables because they cannot be accessed by other scripts.